IKIM Inspirasi Inforia Islami. Welcome. Alhamdulillah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. And welcome to another episode of Open Forum this week. You are with me, Enizahura Abdul Aziz, your host for Open Forum. And with us, insyaAllah, this evening, we have a very special guest. We have with us Dr. Alwani binti Ghazali. Welcome, Dr. Alwani.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for accepting our invitation to be on air in this open forum. And we are now in our new season actually, and this is a third episode, and this is the fourth episode of Open Forum, inshallah. And we are going to talk about a very interesting topic. Before I proceed further with the topic, I would just like to briefly introduce you to our listeners. Dr. Alwani Ghazali is actually a senior lecturer at the Academy of Islamic Studies, University of Malaya. And recently, I think you are also involved as a fellow at the King Abdul Aziz Interfaith, Interfaith Center, International Center for Interfaith Dialogue, yeah?
Yeah.
Right, and Alhamdulillah with that, the experience and also your affiliation with the very renowned Dialogue Center internationally. I think our topic for today, which is interreligious dialogue in Southeast Asia, sharing a perspective, would actually help in understanding what is the prospect of interreligious dialogue in the context of Malaysia and especially in the context of Southeast Asia. So, Dr. Alwani, when we talk about dialogue, when we talk about aspects of dialogue, I think there are so many discussions about dialogue. There are some people who are very skeptical about the success of dialogue, about the efficiency or about the efficacy of dialogue as a method or as a mechanism for interaction among religious adherents. But we know that in Southeast Asia, we have a very dynamic components of religious adherence. We have a large number of Buddhists in Southeast Asia. We have a large number of Muslims in Southeast Asia. And we have, Christians, we have Hindus and so on. So I think, when we talk about dialogue, it's very important for us to understand the prospect or what it can actually offer to the society in such a construction. So how do you see the prospect of interreligious dialogue in this region, Dr. Alwani, if you may share with our listeners today?
All right. Thank you, Puan Annie. Actually, the prospect is very bright. Considering that we have a very rich heritage of different diverse cultural background in Southeast Asia. For your information, in the Bangkok conference that I attended in May this year, we gathered 5 cities. We call it Dialogue Cities Southeast Asia, and there are participants from Indonesia, Davao, Philippines, Singapore, Bangkok, and Malaysia as well. 5 cities gathered, and the participants of this conference were among youth, women leaders, policy makers, and academics. So we are not only talking about dialogue in the sense of organizing simple topics about different cultures or different religions, but we are moving it forward for a better prospect, a better action, concrete actions, catering the needs of women in the society, catering also what the country can do united as a united nation of each state, and also how the youth can promote and advocate dialogue even further. So I see that there are many colors and there are many segments of the societies who are getting involved more in this interreligious dialogue activities. Yeah.
Okay, you talk about, there are participants from countries like Thailand, the Philippines, Singapore, and also Malaysia. is there any significant differences? I mean, do you see any significant differences in terms of how they perceive dialogue and the success rate of dialogue as a mechanism in their countries?
Yes. I can see that in Singapore, for instance, they are more organized in the sense that it is taken up to the level of the officials.
Mm-hmm.
Dialogue activities are done in a manner which the government is involved very closely. So they are structured,
Mm-hmm.
um, meaning that they have many organizations and also NGOs included, and there is diverse activities done by the officials. However, in some contexts, like Indonesia, the organization of dialogue activities are more fluid, not
Mm-hmm.
really government oriented, but the activists among the societal
Mm-hmm.
members, they are
Mm-hmm.
more energetic and more active in organizing most of their activities, and the kind of activities that they are doing are very creative that sometimes you can't even imagine. But however, some of the activities are perhaps not so in line with our general culture in Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
In Malaysian context, I would say that the discussion about the general one, national unity, for example, is coming back to the alphabet A. We have began actually long time ago, uh, but with the changes in the political aspect,
Mm-hmm.
we restart from A,
Mm-hmm.
from A back to to the next level. So I do not know why this is so. Uh, Apart from the political explanation, there is also a concern that our own society does not have the audacity to speak honestly about our differences. Most of the differences are kept swept under the carpet instead of acknowledging, and we attend it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we do not attend to those differences. We tend to avoid. So, in other words, dialogue did not happen in depth in this society. I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that in Malaysia this can be changed, but we will see how it goes, because there will be programs, conferences, programs organized by many parties. So
Mm-hmm.
I hope that something can be changed more drastically in the
Mm-hmm.
near future.
So you have experience, or you have actually, gain info on how dialogue is structured in countries like Singapore, and how is it in their policy? I mean, is there any like specific policy on dialogue
Yes,
to
yes.
be
There
included
are many
in?
policies, but I cannot pinpoint specifically what kind of policies are available, because
Mm-hmm.
for your information, among the academic group of the
Mm-hmm.
Southeast Asian region organized by KAISEED,
Mm-hmm.
we are now in the midst of research. The
Okay.
research is focusing on two things: mapping out who are the advocates of dialogue in our
Mhm.
cities, different cities, and
Okay.
number two, we are collecting all the existing policies within the five cities, and then we'll have a meeting among us, a workshop to
Mm-hmm.
combine the findings and see how it goes. So from there, we will see things more concretely and move forward, hopefully.
Inshallah. I think, when talking about dialogue, definitely there are challenges, there are difficulties, and especially in bringing dialogue as one important mechanism on interreligious engagement. So, do you think, some of these difficulties or some of these challenges? I think then you may share with us, and also how we can actually go about go about this.
It is interesting to see that in how do I say this? I think in majority Muslim countries, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that. In majority Muslim countries, the challenge is the term itself, the terminology, interreligious dialogue, which becomes
Yeah.
a very sensitive term to some.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, because of many issues, this one is philosophical. But
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, in the conference, in the conference the other day, we discussed specifically on this term.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the end, we decided that we have to change the term in
Mm-hmm.
order to achieve similar objective. Instead
Right.
of saying that it is interreligious dialogue, it
Mm-hmm.
would be something like intercultural literacy or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. So
Mm-hmm.
we will see. This is not defined yet. We will
Mm-hmm.
see how it goes. But
Mm-hmm.
but uh, most important thing is, one of the biggest challenges in dialogue is to find a specific term to convey what it meant by dialogue. And for your
Mm-hmm.
information, Puan Annie, I have advertised this dialogue, kemahiran asas dialogue, but uh, to my surprise, there is no much interest in that.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps people do not know what dialogue is, and this term is quite vague, perhaps, and to
Yeah.
some controversial, because
Mm-hmm.
people perceive this as a debate,
Mm.
whereas it is not.
Yeah.
So these are some of the basic issues, but in most cases we are struggling with this basic issue. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the term itself is one of the challenges which I would like to highlight. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would say that that is one of them.
Yeah. I know there are, as you said, yes, you've said, critical opinions on the term interreligious dialogue, interfaith dialogue. So these are among the, one of those challenges faced by those who are involved in promoting dialogue, especially. And you said about, the word kemahiran asas dialogue. The word dialogue itself, to laymen, maybe they're thinking about dialogue in movies, or even dialogue. Why do you need? But then when we talk about dialogue academically, when we talk about dialogue in terms of looking at engagement with people of other cultures, of other religions, we are talking about the interaction, the manner of interaction, the manner of engagement. This is one mechanism. I believe this is what you are trying to promote, the idea of engagement with people of different culture, different race, and different religion, in finding mutual understanding on especially issues that are of concern to mankind. Um, I know when you talk about challenges, especially in coming up with a term of agreement of this, so that people can accept dialogue. But we know that dialogue is not new. We know that it is not a new approach. It is not something which is recently 2-3 years, being put on the table. It has been there in many years, in many interaction of cultures, especially. Um, Engaging through dialogue. You have mentioned this when you talk about dialogue in the prophetic traditions. I think in one of our episodes in Open Forum, I think the previous seasons, you have talked about how even during the time of a prophet, dialogue is also being conducted, or being carried out. And we know that in times of Islamic civilizations, during the caliphates, and also during the Osmania, the empire of Osmania, and so on, dialogue is one approach. How was, as a Muslim, maybe you can understand, you can explain why dialogue is actually important for us to better understand this approach, Dr.
Yes.
Alwani.
Okay, a dialogue is a medium
Mm.
which allows us to be different. That's the
Mm.
first thing. So we do not have to be somebody else,
Mm.
but to be yourself, to be yourself, to be a Muslim, a real Muslim, to preserve your principle, to be real in that sense, but engage with the others openly. And that requires the art, an art of communication and an art of da'wah, I would say. And when we say da'wah, it means that it's the basic thing, it's the fundamental task as a Muslim that we have to do. For example, in one of the principles of dialogue, it is mentioned that that is a time when we can ask difficult question. In fact, we have to ask difficult question, but there are times when we postpone difficult question for the sake of preserving a long-term relationship. This is exactly what da'wah is. Of course, there are many things that we do not agree with somebody that we talk, right? Somebody that we engage. But to convey the message right there and then, sometimes it's not smart. So just postpone that message for a better relationship in the future when the time comes, when the better opportunity comes. This is what dialogue is all about. So instead of being aloof from the others and say that you are pure, you are holy, you are more Islamic, and then you close yourself, but at the same time you do not do the task of da'wah, it's better for you to be with the society, be yourself, but be smart. Have that hikmah to convey the message bit by bit, gradually. So that's how we do it. And that's how dialogue is. That's what dialogue is. So this is where this leads me to another point. This is the place, Kaisit is the place which allows me to be myself in that sense, because that's part and parcel of the principles introduced by Kaisit. Yeah.
You did mention earlier in your conversation that dialogue is not a debate. I think some people, when they talk about dialogue, they're thinking about debate to some extent. They do. I mean, we have to understand that there are people who misunderstand the approach of dialogue. And I think it is important for us to, maybe you can explain, what debate is and what dialogue is to our listeners, Doctor.
Yeah. Debate is actually one part of dialogue, but not all. Dialogue is more general. And dialogue, when we look at the etymology, the origin of the word is from the Greek words dialogos. Dia means through, and logos means words, which means through words. But the fluidity of dialogue is that it moves like a wave between two minds. So it conveys the ideas very smoothly. Whereas debate is aiming at defeating the other people with a better point or better points. Okay, defeating is not the aim of dialogue, but dialogue is creating a bridge to mutually understand the other person. Dialogue, 50% of dialogue is actually listening and processing the information in the mind, whereas the other 50% goes to how you convey the message, express the words, the ideas in a proper manner so that the other person with a different background can understand the message that you convey. So, see the difference. Dialogue is fluid, debate
Okay.
is something stern and quite antagonistic in nature.
Yeah. But how do you think about the difference or the importance of, because people only look at interreligious dialogue, but whereas there is also a need to
Yes.
dialogue. I think, how important is that? How do you feel with regard to these two?
Yes.
approach of dialogue, inter and intra.
Yeah. Intra-religious dialogue is more important than inter-religious dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
actually. But it
Okay.
is more difficult, more challenging to organize
Mm-hmm.
because for some reason, which we need to do some research on this.
Mm-hmm.
For
Mm-hmm.
some reason, we feel more threatened, we feel more defensive with the
Mm-hmm.
people similar to us as compared to the outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
So within the Muslim society, for example, we like to debate more
Mm-hmm.
with,
Yeah.
for example, between Salafi and uh, Khalafi,
Mm-hmm.
between Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah and whatnot. We
Mm-hmm.
tend to debate more instead of
Mm-hmm.
agree more. And when we
Mm-hmm.
look, when we zoom into the Islamic traditions, I would say that from my observation, the more um, the more the more we deal with the thawabit, the more we deal with the fixed things, fixed
Mm-hmm.
dimension of the Islamic faith, that is aqidah, the more we become offensive, defensive.
Mm-hmm.
But when we talk about jurisprudence, on the other hand, the dialogue between scholars are more fluid.
Mm-hmm.
For example, we can see the model of Shafi'i, the
Mm-hmm.
way he described that he might be in the wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The other person, he said that he is confident that his idea is true, but there is a
Mm-hmm.
possibility of being wrong. The
Yeah.
others, in that sense, is not acceptable to him, but there is a
Mm-hmm.
possibility of being true. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
mentality of al-Shafi'i in matters of jurisprudence.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps one reason that we can think about why scholars or not scholars, why people are more argumentative when it comes to thawabit. Perhaps they want to preserve the aqidah, but perhaps there are other ways of doing so. And I would say that the examples of the previous scholars are best to
Mm-hmm.
be uh, to be uh, to be exemplified, to be
Mm-hmm.
seen as our role model in our time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you have said is, true. And in terms of how the previous scholars, the renowned scholars actually set good examples, and this is what we should be modeling our intra dialogue,
Yes.
upon. So I think this is one approach that you have mentioned. I think is very interesting. Um, you are actually a fellow for KAISIT. You have shared in terms of how you doing conferences in I think previously, recently in Bangkok, on a dialogue from the Southeast Asian perspective and so on.
Yeah.
From your experience in bringing dialogue as a method of engaging and interaction among people of religions, what you believe that some of the challenges faced by you and also for those who are involved in this initiative that you think you might have to bringing forward, do more research, bring to the attention of the policymakers
Yeah.
for dialogue to be, adopted as one mechanism of interaction.
Yeah. Okay. Most of us, the dialogue, the dialogue advocates, we are exhausted. That's
Mm-hmm.
one thing that is obvious because
Mm-hmm.
we have many things to do.
Mm-hmm.
For Malaysians, the KAISIT fellows from Malaysians, all of us are among the academics. Only one from
Mm-hmm.
the NGO, that is from Hindu Sangam.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so from Malaysia, we need more KAISIT fellows.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's about KAISIT. But
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking, I see similar faces when I'm involved in the theme of unity, Malaysian unity,
Mm-hmm.
in Malaysian context. I see Dr. Amir Farid, for example, Tuan Haji Jamaluddin,
Mm-hmm.
Shamsuddin,
Mm-hmm.
the Aksin
See you. Yeah.
CEO, and
Mm-hmm.
yourself. on any IKIM, but there are actually many NGOs doing quite the same thing, but we are not gathered yet as a consolidated platform
Mm-hmm.
or effort. I would say we
Mm-hmm.
need to be together to exchange ideas and to move forward more strongly as a team, as a, I do not know how to say this, how to describe it. But in Malaysia, we have the colorful experience, different people, different races, different religions, wanting the same thing, that is unity. Right? This
Mm-hmm.
is something beautiful that we have to do, that we have to come together, stronger together. We need more space for that, for togetherness. I think IKIM is doing a very great job. If your FGD, for example, the Harmony Malaysia, that's a very good platform. You have gathered all these people. We need more. We need
Mm-hmm.
more. Instead of just IKIM, more people have to do that, especially Kementerian Perpaduan Malaysia, Kementerian
Mm-hmm.
Perpaduan Negara, and
Yes.
Japanese. They
Yeah.
have to do something more than what is done by uh, IKIM and by the NGOs.
Mm-hmm.
Please, do something more seriously. Uh, please provide a platform for these people to be together to help the ministry for a better Malaysia. That's what I can see from the Malaysian perspective. The rest of the cities in Southeast Asia, they have different issues. For example, in Bangkok,
Mm-hmm.
the main religion is Buddhism, and they have some conflicts last time in the southern part of Thailand, but they
Mm-hmm.
managed to come together. The religious leaders come together and become one, become good friends. That's a
Mm-hmm.
very good effort. In Indonesia, there are many cultural things going on. The efforts are diverse. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
In Davao, for example, there are problems among the minority, that is the Muslims there. So these are the things that make us ponder, actually, as Malaysians. We have to be grateful because we are actually at a very strong position. But what can we do to leverage more from there?
Mm-hmm. Um, you shared important points. You have actually raised some important concerns, and I think which are very critical and very need to be put forward. But we have come to our end of our session, Dr. Alwani. But as a conclusion, maybe I would just like to ask you the prospect of dialogue among youth, because you've mentioned names like people who have been involved in dialogue for so many years, and they are still there. They are still promoting, trying to bring this interaction mechanism. But where does the youth stand in terms of this, in terms of promoting dialogue, bringing dialogue to the center
Interestingly,
and
Puan Neni,
taking up? Yeah.
interestingly, the youth actually, they do not want race racial issue, religious issue
Mm-hmm.
to be considered in the picture when they talk about dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
To a certain extent, I do not agree with this, because
Okay.
in order to preserve your identity, we have to
Mm-hmm.
come back to the roots. We are
Yeah.
not colored by the secularism because
Mm-hmm.
we are Malaysians. The first
Yes.
principle of rukun negara is kepercayaan kepada Tuhan, believing in God.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, by saying that, let us come back to our root and do more. I see that the youth
Mm-hmm.
now, in the sense of dialogue, they're doing many things, also diverse
Mm-hmm.
things, but in the end, they may lose the compass if
Mm-hmm.
that they are not rooted in that dialogue, in the racial and also religious foundation.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they are afraid that these two become um, the friction of the society, but
Mm-hmm.
we can do better. We can use that the strength of religions and also the strength of races as the point which unite us as Malaysians.
All right. With that, Dr. Alwani, I would like to thank you now for being with us this evening, for sharing your thoughts on a very important topic, which is interreligious dialogue in South Asia, sharing a perspective. You have great commitment, conviction towards this initiative, and inshallah, we'll invite you in the near future to talk about your experience and to talk about what you've mentioned when you concluded this conversation. You've mentioned the concern of youth, that I think we can actually talk about this further, inshallah. And I would like to thank my producer, Haja Maslina Alias, for, as a producer of this program, and to the technical team who are assisting us. And with that, inshallah, see you again. To our fellow listeners on Radio IKIM, do stay tuned to Open Forum next week with more interesting topic. With that, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Doctor.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much.